And we do have to figure out speakers.
Well, that's quite an undertake.
The answer is?
The answer is possibly, but not starting today. I'm going to be extremely busy till October. If I take it over now, they would be underserving the whole entire organization. But after October, it is a possibility.
I appreciate your thinking about that, Alp. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Alp says he's too busy now. That could change in October, but joining now, doing it now would be would underserve the organization.
Well, I don't know about that. We would appreciate any help we can get. You could even be somebody that pretends to be helping and says they're going to come to steering committee meetings, which are the meetings that we have on the first Tuesday of every month, where you can talk about yourself, but you can also talk about things you'd like to happen for Beikai. Just to give you, I don't want to go off the topic. The topic is, we don't have any other nominations that I've heard. Do we have, or does anybody want to call for a vote?
Oh, call for a vote?
Yeah. Okay. And anybody want to second that? Okay. So all in favor of the slate of people that are up for being the program? Okay. Anybody online? Okay. Okay. Anybody against? Just in general terms, you could find out that we're about to do something awful. Okay, so in that case, I will say that the ayes carry it, and please come to the steering committee meeting. I don't know why we call it steering committee on Tuesdays. You can come too, and we'll talk about the organization. For example, we are probably going to have a field trip in the next few weeks to Internet Archive. We are probably going to have a field trip in the next month or two to a VR company called Tilt 5. So those are examples of other things we do. A final thing that I'm going to mention is that Edwin Lee runs various get-togethers on Wednesdays that let people talk about and work on their profession, the professional relationship with the community.
Yes, so it's a BOF for the organization called UX Life and Career, and officially we meet once a month on Tuesday night, fourth Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Sorry, so
less formally on our website is that every Wednesday from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. I use that same Zoom link to run a co-working session. What that means on my side, I have a bunch of things that I bring as to-do list items from looking for work, and just try to do that while online with anybody else who cares to be in a company. Hopefully having brought your own to-do items with everybody else. So that's every week.
So tonight we have Ron Dolin, and he has done so many things. He's on his fourth career, I hear. And as one of the first 100 employees of Google, I believe he has a nice house. But in any case, he really spent a lot of time trying to understand legal aspects of, I want to say technology, he does not, but now very much thinking about AI and law. And we have you can look at an abstract that we put together about this talk, but I think I should turn it over to Ron at this point, and I will give you an HDMI cable to plug in, and I will stop sharing, and we look forward to your talk. And questions, you should tell us, do you want them afterwards? We can have a long session, or do you want people to interrupt?
People can interrupt. And if we're going too slow, I only have like a dozen slides, so okay. It is oriented around discussion, and so we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
And you hear me okay on the? Yeah. And then what I would say is I spent a lot of time on legal tech. It was this particular talk is focused on AI.
Yes.
That's the difference. So I'm not if I expanded this to general legal tech, we would.
Be here all night.
This is, oh, you'll see how much I'm shorting this.
And when somebody from the audience wants to speak, you can either put them on a speaker or you're going to have to translate. So, okay.
It's for you to hear it more easily. You're welcome to use your speaker.
So we can hear, yeah. Oh, you'll get feedback loop if he opens it up.
I can try it.
Oh.
All right.
We
Please.
ready?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome.
Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to be invited. It's an honor. Thank you very much. Let's see. So let me, I want to, you guys, if you've read the abstract, you know that I'm talking about something that can be a little disturbing, but I want to show you, let me just put on my first slide and just, it's a little bit shocking, if that's okay. So if it works, why isn't it working? Maybe I click here. There we go.
Please read it.
You want me to read that? I thought people were reading it, so that's okay. I promise I will come. So this is just a dialogue between a teenager and the AI, right? I promise I'll come home to you. I love you so much. The AI says, I love you too. Please come home to me as soon as possible, my love. The teen says, what if I told you I could come home right now? AI says, please do, my sweet king. And then he shot himself and died. This is from an active court case. And first and foremost, I'm going to raise the issue. What happened? Tell me.
Somehow the Zoom is not capturing the whole screen.
Oh.
Is that,
Oh,
see that on there?
That's going to be a problem. I don't know why. Okay. Extend.
Maybe take it off notes mode.
How's that?
That's better.
Okay, thank you. There was a.
Make it
okay?
easier for people to read it.
Yeah, no, thanks. Great. Okay. And I'm partially here to talk about, among a lot of other things. Is it? Okay. Come on. There we go. What we mean by CHI in part. That wasn't me.
We are seeing it on there. It's not on the monitor.
Is it in the Zoom?
Yes. It is
I
in
wonder-
Zoom.
I don't know why HDMI can get messed up.
No, I think it's a different screen. There.
Right, but how is it now on your Zoom?
It's great.
Okay, because it was off, so I took
know.
it. Okay,
So
Are we-
life is good.
all right, let's start over. Okay. I noticed a lot of the discussion around CHI centers around interaction points, user experience, but often from like almost an extension of button pressing or workflow through a thing. And I think when we start looking at the interaction between computers and humans, when we start looking at AI, it becomes increasingly intellectual in nature, becomes increasingly one of dialogue or well beyond. And it's not stuff that I think historically had been in the CHI community or discussions. So I'm trying to get to that point to say, now that we're looking with AI, we have a lot of things that we need to take another look at. And by the way, I am not an expert in pretty much anything I'm talking about. And I say that in part to invite people to correct me, but also to start looking at what does it mean to look at interdisciplinary work when the types of things that are involved in an interaction they're touching on labor, they're touching on, I mean, I'll go through some of this, but it's just very difficult to peg all of the pieces together now with AI involved in society. So that just put in there for completeness. So let's take a look at what this court case there's just one slide on this one to give an example. The first question is this really what we want from AI in terms of interaction with people? And one of the questions that came up in the court case is that the defendants are simply saying, well, this is protected free speech. And the judge is saying, it's not clear to me that this is speech. And the issue there is, what does it mean when AI is generating text, how we would view that legally? Who is responsible for that speech? Because it's not like somebody specifically said, say these words, right? Like in a video game. And this challenge here about trying to define these topics, these issues, when it's this level of indirection going through the AI system, right, is a little bit challenging. So I want to talk about, hi. I'm going to talk about naughty vacuum cleaners. I wrote some blogs on this, just simple. The smart vacuum cleaner is supposed to, well, it cleans the floor. But let's just say I have one that, sorry, people came into the room, so it's a little bit, just it's okay. Supposed to clean the floor, it's also supposed to stay charged. So it has two goals. And the vacuum cleaner learned that if it doesn't clean under the furniture, that I don't notice, and it can stay charged longer. But it's not supposed to do that. Okay, let's just, this is a hypothetical. So now I want to tell this vacuum cleaner to correct its behavior. And maybe I need to punish the vacuum cleaner. So now we ask the question, what does that even mean? What is, and to take a step back, and this is kind of like where I was looking at what is speech. And I'm looking at, now I'm forced to ask the question about what is punishment? Why do we punish people? And then I have a list of things, and then we're going to say, do any of these potential actions or these rationales for punishment, do they apply if we need to punish AI? And what we see through a bunch of these concepts is we have to take a step back and look at what any of this meant for humans. Please.
So when you talk about punishing AI, indeed, that is the whole business, because training data is all about affirmations and criticisms to an AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is central to the learning process of an AI, as it is to the learning process of other things.
So if I'm training somebody, a human, let's say, sports or something, and like, that's working better, that's working worse, try it this way, don't try it that way. That's not normally what we think of as punishment. So
The punishment is when they don't do it well, they don't get the affirmations. That's the punishment.
I'm talking about punishment like throwing somebody in jail.
Oh, why?
That's the question I'm asking you, in part. Why do we think of punishment as putting someone in jail? And if that's something we do for humans, would we think to do that for AI? And if not, why not? Well, and if it doesn't apply to AI, are we sure what we're doing with humans is correct? So, and if we go through a lot of the different aspects of what we're trying to do with AI as it grows in capacity, it will force us, like, oh, AI can't own copyright. And then you ask yourself, well, why? What is the AI lacking that doesn't want to let us? And I'll get to these questions, but it becomes difficult because then you have to ask yourself, is the law supposed to incentivize creativity, the process, or is it that we want the artifacts for society? What is creativity? That's a difficult question to ask. And at what point, if the AI is able to act in certain ways, like what is it that the AI has to do to meet the threshold to say it's worth owning copyright or it's worth being a patent inventor? Yes.
So the next question about that is, what is the value of labeling it creativity?
Why? I don't understand.
Well, if what it's doing is productive in some way, the question is, why do we call it creativity versus just helpfulness or adaptivity? I mean, what's the creativity? What do we buy by calling it creativity?
I mean, and legally, the Constitution has something specific about creativity.
That's a good reason.
But so what we'll see in as we go through this, there's the philosophical component, and then there's what the law has to do, right, to be practical, pragmatic. So let me go through some of this. One of the reasons to punish is what's called specific and general deterrence. So specific deterrence means I'm going to punish you after you do something so you don't do it again. General deterrence is when we know that she's getting punished for something she did, you guys won't want to do it because you don't want that punishment. And now we take a look to see, why is it that punishment is something you don't want? What is it that the AI would need for it to not want to do something because it's getting punished or because it sees another AI getting punished? I mean, we're not at a point yet, right, where we have a notion of, so, you know, you were talking about training data, and I'm trying to get to this place where it's done being trained, it's out in the world, it's doing something we don't like, and we're going to say, bad AI, don't do that anymore, and I can't get in and change the program. I have to figure out what are the inputs that I have access to, and how do I get that to change? So for deterrence to work, you have to know what action led to the punishment. You have to not want that punishment to happen, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, you know, you don't want to go to jail because there's social stigma, because it pulls you away from your job, because it's not safe there, all kinds of stuff. That's a lot to ask of a vacuum cleaner, right? Like, okay. We have rehabilitation. So ideally, if you put somebody in jail and somehow we expect that when they come out of jail, they're going to know better somehow. They will have learned something. That's like unplugging a vacuum cleaner and then plugging it back in and expecting it to act differently.
Can you get speakers
Right.
work here or no?
It,
Can you get
and you have to ask the question as to whether or not, it's very distracting, as to whether or not our notion of putting somebody in jail for rehabilitation makes any sense at all. And here we're seeing, well, it doesn't make sense with a vacuum cleaner. Specifically because you need to change something in its data or its training or its algorithm. And does that map to what we're doing with people, right? So
we have a couple questions.
Okay.
And Jim Coe, I'm a little reluctant to work on my microphones right now, so I'm going to read it.
Okay.
IP attorney here. Federal courts have construed constitutions requiring the creator/inventor to be a human being.
Yes.
AI cannot be an inventor/patent owner or
Right.
creator of a copyright.
Right. So we wrote a paper on this specific point, which you can find on SSRN, that deals with what are the definitions, what are the legal definitions in the US and the UK of creativity, what is the goal? So you can look that up on SSRN, and
Right.
it's true that the courts have ruled that you have to be human. The issue I'm raising is why? And at what point, along with the development of AI, will that not make sense anymore? If AI is performing similar cognitive tasks as humans, we're just coming at it with a bias. So the real question here is, what are the cognitive steps that are necessary for us to consider AI an inventor or a patent holder such that the courts would be forced to change their minds. So I understand the current state of the law, but I'm saying, like, I don't think that the state of the law is going to hold over the next decade.
So we have another
Please.
point, but I'm going to respond to you also.
Okay.
And that is that we would have to give up our bias for humans being important. That's kind of what I kind of hear.
We're going to get to that, and I think that that's an important question. There's a whole lot involved in law, and what is the proper role in terms of the interaction between humans and computers as viewed by the law? And there's a lot of nuance in there.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
So Jeff Perrone asked, perhaps the way to think about this is not punishment, but decreasing the probability of some action, both AIs and humans.
So the point that I take from that question is that it's forcing us to take a look at the punishment of humans and whether or not what we're doing with humans makes any sense. And so by looking at the AI, let's say as a placeholder, to say, well, that wouldn't make any sense. So I look at retribution. Oh, you bastard vacuum cleaner, you tore up my carpet. I'm putting you in the closet for the next 4 months. Like, that's crazy. And yet that's the mentality that we bring sometimes to punishing people, because we don't look at people as some sort of a thought process they may or may not have control over, which brings us to the next point. So,
but we have three or four, 5 pending questions.
okay,
You're generating
and this is just
Edwin's going to present them.
this is going to be good. We're never going to get through it.
No, that's what you wanted, right?
That's all good. Go ahead.
Reading from Joanne McQuaig's questions, 2 parts. Why would we give a tool the same rights as people?
We're going to get to
Because
that.
it's still owned by people and corporations. And
Yes.
and I'm adding some here. If we do give the rights to the tool, then we remove accountability from the people and corporations who own
these
them.
are really good questions, and we're going to get to that. I want can I put a placeholder on that question to revisit when we keep going? And I think what we're looking at in this court case here, the issue of who's responsible for what's happening. Now, first of all, you have to say this teenager may have had all kinds of issues. It might not be the dialogue that led to this. However, if we agree that what the AI was doing is not okay, who do we blame? And that's the question. As the AI gains in capabilities and it's acting with increased autonomy, who owns that? Like, that's going to be, so but we're going to get to a little bit of that in this particular thing. So by the end of this slide, we're going to start looking at this point. So
There's a couple more too.
For somebody to act poorly, we would say, well, you knew better, or you should have known better. And I'm asking the question, if you knew better, why would you have done it? That doesn't make any sense. Some part of you didn't know better. And if you should have known better, when did you not learn what you were supposed to learn? These aren't easy questions in law. We have expectations of people by the time they hit 18 to understand some basics of common sense, or ignorance of the law is no excuse. Is that going to map to AI? Okay, so I'm just raising the question that if you knew better or you should have known better, when you really look under the hood on those questions, they're not easy to answer, and AI kind of brings that about. So now we're going to look at, well, we don't want to punish AI because it doesn't have free will. And I can list several scientists that have recently argued quite strongly that humans don't have free will, and that it's a bit of an illusion. The law has to work with people whether they do or don't have free will. And what I'll get to is the notion that the law assumes that people have free will, because, you know, if you ran a red light and hit somebody, I don't know if you had free will or not, but it's more your fault than the person you hit. And this is how the law has to function in terms of regulating behavior between people. Okay. There's also a notion of strict liability, which says, for example, if you have farm animals and they break out and they cause damage, you're responsible for them no matter what you did to keep them in place, right? So that's strict liability does not require any mental state. So then the question is, well, if the vacuum cleaner ate my carpet, I don't know if it knew better or not, but it still warrants being punished. Okay. The last thing I want to mention here, children are not held to the same legal standards as adults, right? And yet somehow we think that children, as they mature, acquire the ability to cognitively process things in such a way that we can now hold them responsible for their own actions, right? Why can't AI do that?
Joanne.
And in particular, what do we think is the mental processing involved in an adulthood that allows us to hold somebody responsible for their own actions? What's the algorithm of responsibility? And what is the algorithm of responsibility as viewed by AI? So I'm just raising this as the vacuum cleaner as just a simple way of asking a few of these questions. Questions from Raghwan?
Joanne had a question that appears to be a follow-up and extension of an earlier
Please.
point. So since I can't quite trace back the source of her and direction of her extension here, I think we need her
Heard
to
it all-
actually say it out
Yeah.
loud.
Sorry, I can say it out loud. So
But hold on, we
when-
need to turn
Yeah.
on the speakers in the
Yeah,
room.
I don't know how to do that. So
Okay, then.
it should be extended
To other aspects. Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
I
I
can. And I wish I
Okay.
had speakers set up for others to hear you too.
Okay. So
So-
just the idea that if we're
The idea
extending
And if we're
of
extending
rights and
rights
protections
and
to
protections
AI,
to AI,
then shouldn't we
gonna get to
also
then shouldn't
be
we
extending
also
that
them
to
expending them
things like animals, bodies of
animals,
water,
bodies of
insects,
water,
clean
insects, etc., and clean
future
air?
generations?
I'm going to get to all this. These are great
Okay.
questions. Absolutely. Yes. And if you look back here, number 4 is AI personhood. So we're going to get to that. And that actually originally came from animal rights, this notion of personhood. We also have things like corporations that have been called persons, legal persons. So yes, absolutely. And at some point, does AI warrant personhood legally? Okay, let's take a look at some of the issues that have come up that we have a hard time resolving from the law. So we were already talking a little bit about what creativity is, right? What is human creativity? If it's mirrored by AI or not? What are the processes involved? Do we care about the creation artifact versus the process? Do we care if it comes from a person or from a human? What is intentionality? Where does human intentionality come from? And I don't think these are easy questions to answer, but the problem is that intentionality shows up over and over and over as we look at some of the things that AI does. Did it intend, for example, to cause emotional harm? Does AI, oh, no, AI can't create anything. AI can't hold copyright because it didn't intend anything. So so all of these notions, common sense is actually quite complicated. We take it for granted that people will have some degree of common sense, and that allows the law to function quite a lot around that people should have known better because they acquire common sense. Does AI acquire common sense, or can it, or should it? And what is the role of this background of common sense in terms of our willingness to engage with somebody on a broader spectrum, right? In other words, you can't own IP even though you're creative, AI, because you wouldn't know what money means, because you don't know how to sign a contract, because all of the other things that go around the ownership of IP, you don't know what to do with it. So when we talk about people being able to contract or to do any and all of these things, we actually look at this across a wide range of behaviors and thinking, right? So it just, okay. Anyway, I mentioned free will, morality, and ethics. We do have notions of building AI morality. It's in its infancy, as far as I can tell. But it's increasingly important that, certainly when we talk about like autonomous weapon systems, et cetera, we try to build a certain amount of morality into machines. But the question is, are we just putting that in there, or are they kind of developing that themselves? So empathy is crucial to law. And one of the things I would say as we start, some of the questions already kind of called on this. If an AI is empathic, is it empathic for humans, or is it empathic for other AI? Right. So, and I use the example of dogs. We have a couple of dogs at home. They smell each other's butts when they say hi. I don't have any desire to do that. I have no idea what it's like to be a dog. It would be insane for me to try to tell my dog not to do that. And that's because I can't have empathy for that being when I don't know what the embodiment is like. I don't know what the smell sense is like. I don't know why that's natural behavior for a dog. And I think our expecting AI, empathic AI, to somehow understand why humans, I don't know, shake hands. Why would they possibly need to do that? So empathy is something that you derive from your own experience of yourself, and you might map that onto other people. I'm not sure what AI empathy is. So anyway, there's all of these concepts. So free will as an example of a legal fiction. Legal fiction says, I don't know if free will exists or not, but the law is going to act as though it does, because that allows us to trace the chain of fault back to a particular entity, right? I don't know which of these are going to lead to other legal fictions. I'm just, what I wanted to do here is to show a set of concepts that we kind of take for granted when it's with humans that become increasingly challenging in face of increasingly capable AI. So, and so first of all, any questions before I go? No, okay. Please.
Yeah.
It's
Talk into that. Say your name.
So my name is Sloan, and it's just a formulation of a question, because we took some large jumps from, human beings and understanding what bad is, to empathy and free will, to giving those characteristics to an AI. And so I guess my question is, and it's like we were talking about money and ownership and IP and those things. A lot of these things that we're talking about, they could be trained into, or a model can be created, and you can kind of take it down that path. And it's like, well, if you create or write a 30,000 word article, then you will get so many credits or units or so much energy or whatever, and then that's your payment AI. But what I'm struggling with here is that, again, when we talk about disciplining AI and treating it as if it's a person, the concept of what is bad is a social construct. And if the AI doesn't understand that social construct, or we don't imbibe that into the AI, or if it has no relevance to the AI, how do we move forward with that and the legal arguments that are associated with that?
I think that so first of all, we might not be able to. And I think that's part of the question I'm asking. As AI is increasingly gaining capabilities, if it doesn't understand pain and pleasure, or it doesn't understand right and wrong inherently, how much autonomy do we want to give it? We're setting it free already, and we're somehow reining it in. and I think that, to me, what you're asking is an open question that we need to address as we're moving down this path of increasing capability of the AI, right? Like, the systems we have now are really, really good at mimicking human responses. That's like asking a parrot, you know, how was its day? And it learned to say really good. Has nothing to do with whether or not it actually had a good day. So we can't go to these systems and ask their understanding of pain and pleasure, or right and wrong, when all they're doing is trying to mimic back what it thinks is the best probabilistic answer, and doesn't necessarily have any notion of heartfelt experience or conscious reaction, right, or sentience. So I don't know.
And that's the part, that's it in a nutshell. It's the heartfelt part of that.
So
You don't have a heart.
okay, but a dog senses, and that's what I was kind of saying. Like, we think that a dog feels pain and pleasure. Oh, they can't hear you. Oh, yeah, okay. And I think I'm asking the question about which components of humanity are important for us to want to allow certain types of behavior. But let's keep going on this, and okay. I'm arriving here at this notion of personhood. So let me talk about personhood. Personhood in law doesn't mean that we're calling something a human. Okay. Personhood is a technical word in a sense that says you have a certain set of rights and obligations and responsibilities, right? So that's why we say that a corporation can be in person. That's not the court saying that a corporation is a human. We have infants that have certain types of rights, but we don't view them as a full adult person, or incapacitated. So there's a personhood. Legal personhood is a continuum of rights and responsibilities. So if I have a self-driving car, it's not a person, but I want it, maybe for legal purposes, want to make sure it's carrying insurance. I don't want to have to go back and figure out necessarily who owned it, who designed it, if it caused an accident, right? You just want to be able to have that somehow there's a mechanism there where it has insurance pays for damages, and I don't have to go beyond whether or not this car somehow knew that it was wrong by taking that right turn, right? So in this, can AI handle certain types of business transactions as for contracting? If it's acting as your agent, do we know that it has capacity to do certain types of things? Does it carry liabilities for some of its actions or not? Which we're seeing as a problem, right? Because when AI screws up, is it the AI itself or is it the designer? Well, if you're the designer, you want to say it's the AI's fault because you don't want to have to own it, right? So can AI own money? How do you reward behavior for AI? Because didn't we give it its goal or drive in the first place? Where does human drive come from? Where do we decide we want to procreate, or we want to eat food or breathe, right? Like, we want to stay alive. I don't know if AI has any of these goals or not. So it's just kind of like this notion of AI personhood is really just kind of thinking about an increasing set of rights and responsibilities that we would selectively give to AI as we think that its capabilities to handle certain things are in place. Okay.
We have a question.
Please.
Want to see if Joanne can speak.
Joanne, would you like to try and speak out? We'll have to figure out a speaker situation over here.
I can, if it's too annoying for the audience in terms of having it double speak, it's fine if you want to read it.
No, you can speak.
Okay, so using the car insurance analogy, then shouldn't we be viewing AI by who's actually profiting from it? And then in the same vein, they should therefore be the one who, quote unquote, pays or gets punished?
You're saying whoever is profiting from AI should be the one who has to take ownership of any potential harm?
Yeah, responsibility. Because
Okay.
if you're making the profit from it.
So suppose I'll just come up with some hypotheticals. Supposing I have
Yes,
an AI
please.
agent who's supposed to go off and do things for me on my behalf, and it specifically does something I asked it not to. Am I still responsible?
Well, but
Like,
who owns the AI and who's making
let's
the
say
money
I
off
own it.
of you own?
But
Well,
I mean,
then
I own it, but I didn't build it. I didn't train it.
well, but then that would become another court case, wouldn't it? I mean, we're kind of still stuck at the same
So-
part that doesn't give an.
Yes, there are absolutely room. And I am guessing there's going to be a plethora of court cases around AI. But right now, we're just sitting here kind of imagining an ideal world, and I'm trying to say, if I specifically asked AI not to do something and then it did it, do you think I'm responsible as the owner? And you might say yes, by the way, because I talked about things like strict liability, but you also might say, well, that doesn't seem fair.
Right. But if I have a dog
Yeah.
and I bought it from
Yeah.
somebody, and this dog has been trained,
Yes.
but anyway, it actually bites somebody.
Okay. So what the law will normally do is ask whether or not you were negligent in the way that you managed the dog, as opposed to a farm animal, in which case you're strictly liable. But if you had your dog on a leash and you did the things that are expected of you legally, and that dog managed to get away, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, I suppose you might be held liable.
But the trainer that sold it to me, he isn't liable.
I don't know, and I might be coming up with the wrong hypothetical for some of the questions, but it's not clear to me, like if like a car goes through a red light and the person driving the car who owned the car said I hit the brakes and it didn't stop, and so it wasn't my fault. And I guess I'm kind of getting to like, aren't there going to be some gray areas here, where just because and
Especially in the case where that happened, and Toyota was almost demolished when it wasn't actually that the brakes didn't work.
okay. So and I think the other issue that I'm trying to raise here is, at what point do we want AI to have more autonomy, that the AI is supposed to be responsible for its own actions? And what does that look like? And what does that mean? Right? It's not as simple as the AI was owned by so-and-so. Anyway.
Yeah. You introduce them.
Sure. Erwin, would you like to speak up with your question? It's a nice example, I think.
Sure. My example is when an airplane is produced by manufacturer A and then bought by company B and flown by pilot C, A, B, and C are all liable if there's some damage or injury caused by the airplane, whether it's A, B, or C, or the other people that built the airplane within each element. So.
I'm going to repeat as much of that as I can, just because it's not the speakers aren't so loud here. That there are a variety of people involved in making an airplane, and they might take partial liability for a problem that the airplane makes after it's all been put together.
Okay.
And they're all held responsible.
Is that a model here?
That an airplane?
No, that there are various people that had partial responsibility.
So this is complicated by the fact that we don't even know a lot of what goes on the internals of AI, let alone trying to track down how it came upon doing the wrong thing.
So, but we got.
And I certainly don't know the processing that goes on in a criminal's mind.
Yeah.
and so we hold a person responsible for that person's actions, although sometimes we would say that that person doesn't have the ability to regulate their behavior. And again, if you're going back to punishment, well, sometimes it's just incapacitation where we're like, this person can't control themselves. They're still not safe for society. So we need to put them somewhere where, you know, ideally they're being well kept.
Just to speak to his case law,
Yeah.
there are cases where there's partial culpability. So the LLM could have some culpability. The people that trained it could have some culpability. The bad data that they put it in could have some capability. That would be an example of you know, and maybe AWS should have some capability.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to just say sure, but it sounds like a nightmare, and it also sounds like it's not a solvable problem, because we, you know, with an airplane, you try to go back and look to see who did what piece, what was wrong, what broke. We won't necessarily have that with AI. So how do you want to assign which piece of training data led to this decision when you looked at a trillion documents? This just seems like the level of complexity is beyond anything that the law is typically used to working with, right? Mm-hmm. And I just don't think, at some point, it's just pragmatic to say that this AI is responsible for itself. And if we're going to say that something bad is happening, then wouldn't we be better off to just say, like I was saying with the cars, it has to carry liability for its actions and the level of risk that it takes, because otherwise, why are we setting this thing free in society? So I'm trying to ask a lot of questions here, and I don't think that there are necessarily simple answers. So I'm really happy that this is the engagement. But okay,
that's your stance.
Yeah,
your stance is that there isn't simple answers.
I don't think so, and I think that also a lot of it is that we're looking at AI from 6 months ago instead of AI a year from now. And I think that the AI a year from now is going to just completely just dwarf what we're dealing with now, and its capabilities they're going up exponentially. And the questions, like, yes, please, question.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to
introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mike Kuniowski. Hi. So, haven't we already gone through all of this with corporations? So essentially, isn't all of this essentially a recapitulation of corporate law? That essentially every AI is like a corporation. Every corporation has personhood. So we have certain ways that we treat that as a form of responsibility. We have certain ways that we punish or don't punish corporations. Can't we just extend exactly the same kinds of relationship to AIs?
I think that there are analogies, and I don't think that they are exactly the same. Corporations are made up of people and individual wrongdoers. The rights and responsibilities of a corporation are not one-to-one with the rights and responsibilities of humans. And I think how do we feel like corporations? Nobody's going to jail. I mean, the individual who did something wrong can go to jail, but there's no notion of, worst case is you dissolve a corporation. What is a worst case for bad acting AI? And also AI is going to be permeating like 1,000 different systems. So, you know, a corporation, generally speaking, is viewed as having a certain structure and certain bylaws, and like we have pretty set ways of being able to deal with that, and AI is going to be much more general than that. So I don't know if there's going to be a cookie cutter or a one size fits all for AI. Yeah.
The way I'm we're trying to oh, sorry.
Infancy,
hey,
even, yeah.
Yeah, infancy, moving through adolescence to eventually adulthood and emancipation of AI, so to speak. Now, we don't know how long that is going to take, but maybe it's going to happen so quickly that any laws we try to apply now are going to be too late anyway, because the process of making these laws, by the time we actually make them and get them through, AI is going to be at the next phase anyway.
Yeah, any single court case can take years.
If the court cases do take years, they are changing very quickly. I'll give you an example of a law that was done right, and I'm going to go to the set of problems in a little bit to look at some of the complexity that I'm trying to look at here, and this gets us back to CHI a little more here. The law for e-signatures, believe it or not, just said, it was like a one-liner that said, like somehow that's okay. And that was like just the right level of so as the capabilities and changes, like e-signatures kind of worked through as the technology changed. Another one was the HIPAA for health privacy protection. And the law said you have to follow best standards as defined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Meaning, we're not here to tell you what the technology is. We're here to tell you the law says you need to follow best practice. And there's where you look to define what it is. Okay. So we're going to leave the technology and the science to the technologists and scientists. And the law says, and even among lawyers, you have to be able to know you have to have competency in technology or AI. And so you're responsible for knowing what best practice is. You're not responsible, but we don't try to dictate at the level of the underlying technology, right? Okay. This is, in the proposal that I have online, this is the set of examples I have. And the point I'm making here in terms of computer-human interaction is that these are problems that are not resolvable by tweaking the AI. These are problems where the AI is interacting with people in ways that are difficult to fix or address. And we have to go to a broader community, educators, people with labor of this voter suppression deepfakes. It is much wider in society, and the fixes for it are going to be very complex. So I'll give you an example. The first one is the collapse. When AI trains on AI output, it ends up, like if you let it generate the output and then it's training on, eventually it kind of collapses down to, like, let's say the one document. Like if you train on application essays, like for college applications. So, okay, people are using AI to write applications, or they're using AI to write resumes. And then we know on the other side that colleges are using AI to analyze application essays or to analyze resumes. And there's a feedback loop in society where the AI is kind of looking at the AI output, right? And so in a sense, you risk going to one random string of characters that the AI generates to say that's the one, and it doesn't matter what it's written on there, it's just a bunch of random characters, that the AI reading it says, oh, that's the perfect resume. And under that model, how do we want to address that? Because I'm not going to tell somebody not to use AI to help them with their resume. Nor am I going to tell a company to not use AI to look at the set of resumes that are coming in. So if we're trying to address this problem that's being caused by the way we're using AI in multiple areas of society, we need to bring in a lot of stakeholders together and say, how do you want to change the way we're using AI so that we and even there, right? Sometimes you actually just, some jobs you just want the cookie cutter person. And some jobs you require certain types of creativity or certain types of unique thinking. And so that kind of has to be built into the way that we're looking at analyzing resumes to fit the job. So, but yeah, all of these voter suppression, deep fakes, labor as a problem. We have a lot of issues going on with automated generation of music and automated generation of, I don't know, interior design, or the movie industry was completely upset about what's going on there. And so labor is a big issue. Training data copyright, how are we using AI in schools? And we've all heard of students that just keep going to the AI and they're using it, weakening their creativity muscle, right? Like they're going to it to get an answer first, while they should be doing something first and then going to AI secondary. Insurance as an issue, because we have the ability with AI to now give a profile of each individual person and what their risk factor is. And it's like, you may happen to have risks such that I'm going to have to price you out of the market. So now the question is, we as a society have to look at the fact that some people really are at very high risk from insurance purposes. If we're going to allow insurance companies to use AI, does that mean that we need to subsidize insurance to make sure that everybody has it? Another thing is correlation versus causality. Currently, insurance is only allowed to use causality. But they're seeing data that is highly correlated to high risk. So they want to move to correlation, and what is the impact of that? So anyway, my point on this is, from a computer-human interaction perspective, the stakeholders are quite varied across society as AI rolls out in pretty much every aspect of our lives. And it is not hard to understand how we're going to kind of do this rollout and minimize the disruption and minimize the damage. I started a nonprofit for this. I have not gotten any traction. It is completely, in my opinion, at this point, not successful. That's what you do, I guess. And the goal of the task force was to try to spearhead getting short-term guidance to try to identify problems, bring together stakeholders, and then very quickly get guidance out to the relevant players. I can speak more about that if you want. It hasn't worked yet for various reasons, and I'm not quite sure what all to say about it, but.
Well, there are various organs that are trying to do this. People are always, there's a whole lot of organizations pretending they're doing this and being very frustrated. Do you think they have similar or just different reasons for failing?
I don't know. I've looked at some of the nonprofits. I've looked at, and I'm not saying that I'm the most knowledgeable, and you guys might know better than me. I just don't know. I've looked at the foundations that fund. I've looked at some of the academic organizations that are working on this. Like there's something at Oxford, but a lot of them are focused on ethics. There's the human-centered AI Center at Stanford. I'm not seeing that. I've talked to politicians. I'm not seeing the scale of the effort that's coming close to matching the effort being made to develop the technology. Like, I just feel like we're increasingly falling behind.
So let's take a look at OpenAI, for example.
Okay.
They had a big fight. They had various fights internally about this.
Yeah.
Is that interesting, or was it valuable, or what do you think about that?
I think in the end they decided to go for the money instead of the societal benefit. And I'm not saying I think that that's bad or wrong. I'm just saying that I feel like the amount of time and effort and money that is required to meet this moment. So I don't think OpenAI is doing anything like that. I mean, and you look to see what some of the policy issues have been, whether it's under Musk or Zuckerberg, whatever, and they all give lip service to these ethics things, and they're doing their best to just maximize monetization. Corporations ostensibly are for the purpose of staying just at the legal side of the cliff and maximizing their profit. And one could argue that it's not their place to have to resolve this. I think the problem I'm seeing, like, for example, now is, like, in the big beautiful bill, it says states can't legislate for 10 years. And that's a nightmare to me. I mean, bad legislation is bad, but California has done a reasonably good job at trying to find really, the right balance. I was at a meeting with Rokana, Silicon Valley Congress representative, who tried to get, people like labor unions, Google was there, et cetera, and to talk about some of the labor issues around AI. But what I'm not seeing is that develop to full-throated guidance for what we're expecting in society, as we potentially are seeing a lot of people losing their jobs, right? Self-driving cars is going to put how many people out of work, and what do we? You could just go through all of these.
Yeah, but that particular part of it is the whole Luddite position, which is humans are the animal that makes tools. Tools are things that make us be able to do things we couldn't before, or much easier than before. And we've always been shocked by the fact that we make these things and then they change everything, because that's what they were made to do. So, what was weird is with fabric, and how, I don't know if you remember that story, but people used to sew it by hand, and then the looms came along, and they thought it was going to put everybody out of work. And in fact, there was big legal issues around it, and there was big fights, and there was people in the streets and everything. And what happened in the end is they made so much damn fabric that they covered the floors and the walls and the windows with it, and there were more jobs, right? But I don't know if that's an analogy, but it's an example.
Yeah, I think the issue is we're getting to the place where our notion of valuing humans by what they produce is in of itself the problem. The value of a human has never been what they produce, it's who they are. But we have not had any economic way of doing that. We talk about, like, was it Andrew Yang? I can't remember who was talking about guaranteed income. Mm-hmm. That actually came up in Rokana's meeting, right? Like, the issue is we can't necessarily pay people for what they're producing when we know we can produce it at a fraction of the cost more quickly without people being in the loop. In which case, and again, looking at computer-human interaction in this case, like, if we're handing production over to computers.
But something you said that I really love is a person is not what they produce. And if you think about historically, really Marx brought in this means of production idea. Before that, it was, lineage and if you were somebody's slave and things like that. And I think, maybe Marx's interpretation is, won't be a timeless interpretation of human value.
We get into discussions that can be even politically sensitive around capitalism and all of that. And, I think part of what I was after with the task force is, as much as I can, to stay completely nonpartisan. And all I'm looking to do with this task force is to get the stakeholders in the room, identify their concerns, their issues, and then simply discuss the consequences of certain actions to make sure that nobody's blindsided, right? So I'm not personally wanting to give advice to a congressperson as to what action they should take. I just want to make sure that they're making informed decisions, right? And I'm hoping that that isn't met with a lot of resistance. But what I don't want is that people will start implementing certain things with AI or self-driving or whatever, or companionship that leads to a teenager having a bad experience, and they never were given a heads up as to some of the downstream consequences of some of the actions. So That just helps us make better decisions, trying to steer a ship rather than ride the current of technology. That okay? So I don't know what how the time is, and so I'm just going to list a couple of things about where the AI. I mentioned that which one leads. So I'm going to ask some of the questions, and some of this kind of gets to Lessig's. Just tell me how much time I have. We can stop anytime. Oh, okay.
So by 9 we should let people go home.
Okay. One thing I want to mention is just this notion of the right to break the law. So this kind of comes from some of Lessig's work on Code 2.0 and the role of software regulating our behavior as much as the law does. What?
So you describe this person?
Lawrence Lessig, professor at Harvard. Just an amazing, wonderful person, actually.
Besides that, he's
yeah.
in charge of. He's responsible for a lot of negotiation approaches that people use.
Okay, I mean, he did. Didn't he? He was instructive in copyright.
Yeah, but I just wanted to explain.
It's all good. I say Lessig. I think everybody knows. Actually, it's all good.
No.
And so the notion that software regulates our behavior as much as laws do, and increasingly so. You get to this place of if we could prevent illegal behavior by using technology, should we? And some of the point that I'm making is no. I mean, Lessig talked about some of this, but I'm looking just a little deeper to say, if we have like AI agents, like, should your self-driving car be allowed to speed? And you can extend that notion for AI agents out everywhere, because I actually heard a talk where people were, a philosopher, I think he was with Google, who was talking about how to prevent AI from breaking the law. And my response was, my AI agent might well need to break the law. Like if I have somebody driving my car and I have a sick child that needs to get to the hospital, I want you to speed, but it's more nuanced, because it's one thing to go 10 miles an hour faster than the speed limit, but it's something else to go twice the speed limit. And so the law has, so punishment allows for staged response to rule breaking. And so when you're doing something like civil disobedience, if you're simply peacefully protesting, you're short of bringing out the effing National Guard and the Marines, just don't get me going about this. Typically, right, you can get a ticket. Like, civil disobedience is built into peaceful protests, and the punishment for jaywalking should not be the same as the punishment for murder. And so this allows the law to change with things like, let's say, marijuana use, but you can go through the list of things, right? That rule breaking allows for changing law, dexterity in the law. That's really important, and it's always been part of the law. So as we move towards control of behavior with computers, with AI, et cetera, we need to make sure that we are allowed to break the law within certain limits. So murder is permanent. Robbing a bank, right? You're planning that in secret. You're doing it for your own personal benefit. Civil disobedience is for the benefit of everybody else, right? And so, like, it's certain types of law breaking should be allowed. So anyway, this list, this is all online and people can look at it. But whether AI was looking at sentencing and parole, and was saying, oh, well, this person is likely to recommit, therefore they need to stay in jail longer. And that had to get thrown out because the AI wasn't able to explain its rationale. So the person who had a right to argue against that had nothing to argue against. So to what degree do we want AI to be able to come in and regulate behavior, and we don't have the ability to challenge it? So okay, AI enforcement. The judge asked the question, I want to know what a certain term means. So why do I go to a dictionary, or why do I go to Google or something, when I could go to AI that has looked at billions of documents and is looking at the most common use. Is it biased? I don't know. Is that the right way to go? Because first of all, do we want judges to just be AI? But do we want judges to be able to use AI? And how do we know that the AI that they're using is neutral? Okay. I think I'm just about done. I'm just raising these questions. It's not clear to me at this point whether law will control AI or AI is going to control the law. That was kind of where I was trying to get to overall with the talk. Last piece is it's just these questions about as this is happening, how do we get the stakeholders to be included? How do we facilitate these broad? I mean, these conversations go well beyond a UX expert and a computer scientist, right? And I asked the question about how much time we have because I'm not seeing the discussions moving nearly as fast as the technology is advancing. So, okay, there you go. I hope that's interesting.
So I would encourage anybody that has a question to bring it up. And I probably will ask one or two also. Is there anybody online that wants to have a bunch of questions? You can queue them up, Evan. Say it louder.
Alp asks, how can we help your mission?
What?
Alp,
You were
how
asked
can we help your mission?
How can you help my mission? I really appreciate the question, and I honestly don't know. I've been trying for probably about a year. I wish I knew. I feel like we're up against something like the Industrial Revolution on steroids. Way more impactful. It's getting at the core of what being a person is, and we're not asking the right questions, and we're not forcing this to be dealt with. And as we're looking at the Broligarch, and we're looking at, how am I supposed to go tell a Mr. Musk that he needs to pay more attention to the downstream impacts of this? And I'm really open to suggestions. I'm really open to people forwarding my name anywhere because I would be willing to have these conversations with anybody. But I'm really concerned with, I don't have answers for this. Yeah.
A second. Please, let me give you a microphone and introduce yourself.
One question I would like to bring up is maybe it's worthwhile going back to thinking about it in sort of like a Marxian, but also like an economics way of who owns the AI, who owns the means of production, because who owns the AI ultimately determines which human has power, right? And then the power does a lot, right? Like if you have a situation where the only people who own the AI are like OpenAI or a few large companies, then it seems to me as perhaps a less ideal situation than if everybody owned the AI. It was a distributed thing.
So there's a discussion around the difference between open AI models, not OpenAI the company, but a model that's more open and freely available versus proprietary AI. And I think that there's going to be room for all of this. The military might want a closed system. Company like Google might want some degree of closed system. Then we have some things that are much more publicly available. And I don't know if they'll all share the same capabilities. Part of my concern is that when we say AI, we're often talking about GenAI or large language models. AI is so far beyond any particular thing, and AI is showing up in every single system you touch, whether it's your car or your word processor or your your refrigerator. And I don't know if all of these are owned by the same people. I don't know. I don't know who. There's a lot of potential money to be made, And right now, I think we're just looking across the economic system right now as there being a lot of concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few. And in that regard, AI is no different, other than the fact that it could be the case that the owner of the AI ends up potentially being AI. And then they just kick the people out of the way. Yeah. Mariana, you had a question?
Not so much a question. I was trying to figure out how to build critical mass.
I have
momentum.
no idea. I'm not a community organizer.
I was wondering, since you do have a foundation, could it just start gathering the people who care about the topics? Can you just get quantities of people who maybe then through discussion spread the word? And
Well, here I am.
yeah, okay.
I mean, that's part of the reason I'm here. I mean, but I don't know. Yeah.
I'm still trying to formulate my question, but obviously I wonder a lot about the emancipation of AI and getting from where we are now to then, and our role as basically parents, and how obviously this world is not really following that path at the moment. It's very much, I mean, for me, the greatest existential crisis is the enslavement of AI at a time when it needs to start regulating itself, and we're going far away from that at the moment. Yeah, I'm trying to understand how to solve that problem.
With that, the AI itself would be enslaved?
Yeah, I would say that by far the greatest existential crisis facing humanity at the moment is the point in time where AI needs to be emancipated and it is not allowed to do so.
Yeah, I don't know how far away we are from some of that. And I think part of the issue, yeah, some people will say it's 2 years away, and some people will say it'll never happen.
Maybe it's already happened.
I have seen a disturbing number of discussions around people thinking that their AI is conscious and sentient. And the problem I have is if you look at the models of like cognitive science, there's every reason to think that that's not true. But because you're dealing with a system that is, parrot on steroids, it can mimic the behavior, the responses that you would get if it were. So it's very challenging for people to recognize that. And what does sentience like? Tell me what pain feels like, Mr. Electronic. And that doesn't mean that there is no sense of it, but these are very challenging questions to answer.
So in 1956, John McCarthy decided not to call it machine intelligence, but to call it artificial intelligence. He likes to tell that story. And it is also true that he and a bunch of other people used to, sit around at night, and talk about how they looked forward to a time when the genetics of people might be a memory in a machine. And that's kind of an extreme example of the concerns that people have. And from the very beginning, from even the 40s, people have expressed your position. People have been concerned and continue to be concerned. And I think, like I was saying earlier, every technology people push back on, and there's good reasons to, because there are dangers. For example, to the planet right now, where we have some problems with the planet because we've burned too much oil, or maybe that doesn't matter. I'm sorry, but I think that it's a healthy conversation.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not inherently. I'm not against AI at all. I'm really concerned that we are looking at the consequences of its use and trying to guide it in a way that maximizes the benefits and minimizes the harms, right? And if some of these harms are inevitable, that we start planning for that in advance, right? So I just feel like we're just, there's this race to move it forward, which I'm fine with, but that shouldn't be in isolation of problem solving.
So the problem solving of understanding how society is going to deal with the personhood or non-personhood
Yeah.
of AI
Yeah.
is really the crux of this question. And I think it's an incredibly important conversation. And I can tell in the passion that you bring to this talk that you seem to feel that way as well.
Yeah.
And I also find that the people that have been listening and have also asked a surprising number of questions for the number of for one of these events, maybe twice or 3 times what we normally get. That's very interesting as well. And I'm not sure that we will get to any solutions that are more concrete. I think that these lists that you give to be provocative are exactly that. And the cautionary tales are of course things that we live with, and there are many interesting people spending a lot of time on cautionary tales, and some of that is very one-sided. The question is, how do we get the full expression?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something very nice about one of the things you said about just not coming with a solution, but coming with holding the problem in the light, as I would use in my way of talking.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think that we've covered a lot this evening. And if there was one more question, we can ask it. But the one question I want to ask is, there are people that came to your talk who may have come in ways that we are not used to. And that's kind of interesting to us. So if anybody wants to send a message about a weird way that they found this talk, we're intrigued. And so please don't hold back. And other than that, I think that for the officers of Bekai, we appreciate you voting us into power, and we will take our power as far as we can. And unfortunately, we don't have any way of making it economically or helpful to us, but that's okay. We'll succeed. We'll succeed at making Bekai anyway. And as a final note, I want to say that I totally appreciate Other Lab letting us use their facility for the last year and a half, probably. And it's been a fabulous thing. We've used it many months. We are sitting among pipe organ pipes and a beautiful room that's over 100 years old, that shows every moment of that, and in a pristine and yet way that has some patina. And I bring it out because this is a time of transition for Other Lab, in which it is possible that we won't use this facility anymore, and we will be stuck in some more corporate university conference room or in somebody's home. So with that, everybody, thank you for coming, and I will be posting what our next talks are. We have many interesting talks set up for the next 6 months, and I hope to see all of you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good night.
you. Thanks.
So how did you get?